Welcome back to What Happens Next, the channel dedicated to having nuanced, interesting conversations about the next chapter of our lives. If you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s or beyond, and you're thinking about making a positive change in your life, in whatever direction you want to take it, be that retirement or that exciting new chapter, you're probably in the right place. I mean, you can be the judge, but you're probably in the right place, because what we do at What Happens Next is interview experts, have conversations, and just explore some of those topics that probably aren't talked about when we talk about conventional retirement. Because in my life as a chartered financial planner, I'm really lucky that I get to support people with the financial side of understanding how much is enough and getting them to the point where they can live the life they want with the money they've got. But what I've realized after 20 years of working with clients is often the transition into that next chapter is often about a lot more than the money. And that's why I'm really pleased today to be introducing David. David, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. And thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure. Now, we were talking about before, we were talking about the fact that you're speaking to a lot of people like me at the minute about the work that you're doing. And I find it fascinating that often the response you're getting is sort of not my job, Gov. I will sit in my own little box and do this. Why do you think that is?
God, that's a very good question. I think we're on the same page regarding holistic approach. Okay, so it's an easy conversation to have when you're talking to other financial advisors. I think you made the point when we were speaking earlier that certain people are put into a box. They've got a role. They're perhaps within a larger company.
Yeah.
Okay, and they can't veer outside of that. It's not allowed. Right? It's not part of their job description. So I think a huge percentage probably is that.
And I don't think I think all professions. It's that old phrase, isn't it? You know, if you've got a hammer, every problem is a nail. And it's that element of saying, well, what do I define myself? But you know what's interesting for me for that is, and we have conversations with clients about it all the time. That goes a lot to what do we view ourselves as in the world, because often that link to job is quite an important one, isn't it?
You mean the identity, your identity?
Yeah.
Well, identity is a huge issue. I mean, particularly in everything that I do. So people have identities in their role, and we'll come to talk about it later. But as soon as you go into retirement, you almost definitely lose that identity. So big thing, big subject.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to that, but we're jumping ahead of ourselves a tiny bit. So let's start with a little bit about what brings you here today. Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, okay, my story. I'm 66 now. I don't feel it, but I am. I spent 40 years-ish working in the financial markets in investment houses in the city. My area was running large projects, mostly implementation projects for that. So for the first 10 years of my working life, I was an employee, and for the remainder up until now, I started and ran various consultancy companies. So that's my kind of background. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have worked pretty much all over the world, which was, great fun. And I've been doing coaching in one form or another for probably 10, 15 years.
How did that journey start?
Sorry?
How did that coaching journey start for you?
That journey started really with my own employees and consultants that I had, because, you know, I'm all about making life simple. Okay. And, you know, if you've got consultants out in the field and they're talking to clients, okay, they're the best salespeople, right? They're the best marketeers for your company. So it dawned on me very early that if you coach them,
okay, you help your people,
that it's great. It's a win-win-win all the way around, and that started that journey, and it continued through work I was doing, and eventually led to the work I'm doing with the Life Map.
I love that. And tell me about your what happens next moment, because it sounds like you were doing this work in the business, quite happily consulting. What was the big point where you said, I don't want to do that anymore, I want to do this?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a huge milestone for me. So there are various milestones, Chris, in my life. They really started in my 40s. Okay. So I'm not sure if you've ever read a book called 20 Good Summers. Have you ever come across that?
No. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the author's a guy called Martin Hawes, Hawes, and what it's really about is its target audience is people in their mid-40s onwards, and it's saying that, you know what, you've only actually got 20 good summers left. It doesn't mean you're going to die at the end of that, but it just means that, you know, for regards to, you know, particular holidays you might want to talk to it, and so on. It kind of concentrates the mind, right?
Yeah.
It's a great book. It's worth a read, and that pretty much coincided for me. Again, I was in my sort of early to mid 40s, and my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and from that period on, for the next 10 years, it was pretty horrendous, I must say. It was just bad. Okay. Yeah. And at the end of that, one of the certainly one of the business implications I had, forget the family implications, but the business implications was that I effectively lost one of the businesses because I wasn't paying attention enough to it. So Sue died, unfortunately, and it's still kind of hard even now. But and I had to reinvent myself. I mean, I can talk about a little bit more of that later, but which I did, and it was a major milestone. It was a major kick in the backside for me, really. And as a consequence, I started up another consultancy business. Not straight away, but that was good. But I started it under a new rule set, which again I hope we get to talk about that. And then over a period of time, my next major milestone was I got married again to Lisa. She's a West Coast Canadian. That was about 4 years ago. That was a COVID marriage in the back garden, you know, with a freezing cold in Canada. And now we have this passion project, really, which is the Life Map, which is taking off. And there's some of the major milestones.
Yeah. I'm 47, and one of the things that's had an impact in our life recently, mine and Kat's, is losing friends. So we had a friend who unfortunately we lost cancer. She was 52, and it does, for us, it has made us really seriously consider what life is about. Because when you lose people, particularly earlier than you expect, you think about things in a different way. David, I appreciate this is super sensitive. So if you tell me you don't want to talk about it,
no, it's good to talk about it.
Yeah, so tell me about how your perspective on life changed, how your thoughts changed, what happened during that journey.
Okay, so when Sue died, I was lost, basically. As I said, the business had been neglected, and when I look back on it, I was kind of eased out of the business, and probably rightly so, to be fair. But nevertheless, it left me kind of angry and I guess broken. Really,
Yeah.
I was broken.
Yeah.
Right? So I needed to start again, and yet I felt exhausted after the 10 years of holding everything together. And it's and that is coping with family, and you're on the front line, that was, as I say, it was hard. So that was a bit of an emotional roller coaster for me. But what happened is I reverted actually to my business world, right, and my experience, which was managing projects. Managing large projects, and boy, this was a large project, right?
Yeah.
And so I treated it like a project, and this kind of follows through my whole life since. Really. So I have read and researched like you wouldn't believe. Reading books, 2 or 3 books a week. I mean, it was YouTube videos, anything I could get my hands on. I was reading or watching, and I used all the best ideas, reinventing the wheel. Basically, I used all the best ideas, and I just got on with it. And I knew that I needed to have meaning to my life, right? Which and I obviously knew that I needed a purpose, but I didn't know what either of those were, to be honest, at that point. So, and the way that I got over it, the process I went through, went on to to be named the Life Map, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's completely fair. There's nothing new about what we talk about on What Happens Next. Actually, a lot of the things that we try and share have been around for thousands of years, because the Stoics used to talk about them, and the Taoists used to, there's lessons to be learned for all of that. But trying to frame it in, as you say, that the biggest project you've ever undertook, which is your own life, you try and reframe it in a way that helps people. So you've talked a couple of times about the Life Map. Tell me about that. What is it? How does it work? And how does it support people when they're thinking about the next chapter of their lives?
Okay, yeah, I can talk about that. I'll have to talk about it in summary form, because otherwise I'll be here for hours. So maybe I could just talk about myself first of all, because I was obviously the avatar for it. Right? It was built for me. I didn't think anybody was going to look at it. I didn't think I'd be using it really necessarily for anybody else. It was just for me. From a project point of view, I first of all put myself through a self audit, and boy, that was hard, right? I realized that I was always in a rush. I was always planning for the future rather than today.
Yeah.
Which is, this again, like you said, all these things, when you read various books, and they're all saying the same thing. It's the same messages time and time again. And then I realized that was me, right? I was I probably always have been driven by money to a certain extent, certainly up until that point. You know, family history, not that well off from a background point of view, and so that certainly affected me in my early life. I'd also realised that when I did that self-audit, my fitness had gone downhill significantly, right? And I thought, oh, wow, that was a huge wake-up call for me. Mentally, I was in a bad place, you know, and basically my tank was empty, right? I was kind of running on fumes, right? So that's the first thing actually that we do in the life map, is to do a self-audit, get people to actually think about where they're at.
Can I ask a couple of questions on that?
Sure.
Firstly, the element of how do you self-audit so that you're not pretending that everything's okay? Because I often think that element of, you know, I think we're all guilty of this. We're all guilty of telling ourselves stories about the world to validate our own actions and behaviour, right? Often. So how do we look in the mirror and get brutally honest with ourselves about what's working and what's not?
You've hit the nail on the head. Most people don't, right? And most people can't. But we encourage people to be as honest as they can when they first enter into the life map process. And then pretty much the first lesson, if you like, the first task that we do is second guess people on their audit, on their self audit. You know, well, what did you mean by that? Are you really sure? Okay, so it's amazing. So at the end of that self audit, the difference between the version that somebody's filled in themselves and the version that we actually end up with, and we encourage all the way through the process for them to go back again and back again to their self audit and amend and amend and amend. It's not until, you know, you peel away the layers of the onion that you start to realize, well, actually, yeah, maybe I wasn't as truthful to myself as I should have been. And they go back and we say, don't just recognize it, go back and physically change it.
Yeah, it's an evolution, isn't it? Into what's next.
It is. So that's the beginning. So that I did that for myself, and then I embarked on the process, which has become the life map, which again I can talk about. But at the back end of that, from my point of view, is I now live in the now.
Yeah,
that's the way that my mind works. You know, I'm grateful every day for being in the now, and happy where right today. You know, not happy next week. I'm going to be happy when I go on holiday.
Yeah.
And then I also have another thing that I guess I always had, but I kind of acknowledge it and go with it, is that I keep going. I never give up, but I must have fun on the way.
Yeah.
That's like sacrosanct for me. It has to happen.
Yeah.
And if I'm not having fun, I don't do it.
But it's so, I agree. But how much of that is about perspective? And I mean, it's really interesting when you talk about that desire for success being only linked to financial wealth, because I'm from a background where we certainly didn't have much, and I think you get to a point where you go, well, actually, that capitalist, individualist society version of success about accumulating as much as you can is a bit flawed in terms of the link between overall well-being and money. And that's an interesting conversation. You mentioned about health, that you were neglecting health a bit, and you were neglecting other elements of your life. What elements were strong, and what elements did you? What was the most surprising element when you looked at your own life map and thought, you know what, I thought I was all right there, but I'm not?
I think it was, for me, it was across the board, actually. I think, if I'm honest with myself, I thought I was a lot better, even though I knew I was kind of broken when I first started it. I was surprised myself when I went through each of the areas and said, okay, well, totally on it. And I listened. I wrote a list, and then I'd be waking up in the night and going, yeah. Then I'd get up and literally come out and sit at the desk and write a couple of notes and go,
yeah,
actually, it's this. So
it goes back to that examine life, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? That element of like just, and I don't know about you, I often find journaling's really helpful because I'm always honest with myself when I write. And it's interesting how that process works. You mentioned, David, about being in the now.
Yeah.
And I read a book. Somebody recommended me a book a couple of months ago now that I read. And interestingly, some of it I wasn't particularly aligned to, but I think the messages were really relevant. Because the bits that didn't align to me were the spiritual bits of the book. But I thought The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle was a really interesting book. Because I think we're often guilty of, and I certainly am, of turning around and going, where do you want to get to as opposed to living in today? What are the 2 or 3 things that you'd suggest people think about when they're trying to live more today?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think that just pops out at the end of when they do a sort of a self audit. I was kind of looking at their own life, introspection, right?
Yeah.
I think it's different for everybody. I don't think there's one flavor, is for all. For me, obviously, lots of my life has been driven by my late wife, and obviously not just the passing, but the illness over that 10 years. So my mindset is heavily influenced by that, and so when I was in project meetings or crisis meetings afterwards, in the workplace, and everyone was panicking around, this isn't going to work. It's not working now. It's not going to work next week. I ended up being the calm person in the room, and they were going, "Well, how comes you're not excited or annoyed, or where's the emotion?" I said, "Look, right as we're sitting here right now, right, has anybody died?
Yeah.
Right. Let's get some perspective on that."
Yeah.
And obviously the answer is no. Right. So all these things that we think about and we think of as a huge problem. This is a huge area for conversation. This is probably something we could talk about for an hour on its own, I think. But there's no point. You're wasting energy if you're thinking anything outside of the right now.
I think the interesting question that I love is, will it matter in 10 years' time? Will this stuff matter in the medium to long term? Now that the challenge you've got with that is sometimes that means that you're then future focused as opposed to focused in the now, but it does frame things with an element of perspective that helps me make those decisions. One thing I wanted to talk about, and you're right, all of these questions we could spend hours talking about, but And maybe we will at some point. But
Sure.
today, I want to understand a little more about the 7 areas of the life map. So, in summary, what are the 7 areas, and what are the constituent parts in those areas that you ask people to reflect on?
Okay. So at the summary level, we find that there are 3 major kind of high level problems that people encounter. This is pre-retirement going into retirement.
Yeah.
The one that I think is probably the biggest one, although it's debatable, is identity loss. So people have identity loss definitively when they go from even with planning. I think sometimes this happens. The second one is overwhelming uncertainty. They just don't know, and sometimes don't want to know, Chris, what's going to happen, right? And then the third one is an obvious one, which is financial worry, and that's normally about have they got enough. And the outcome that we obviously want, we all want, is renewed identity, a clear direction, and financial confidence. They're the 3 things. So you mentioned the areas, we call them pillars. The pillars that hold up these 3 areas are areas of your life that I divided up. Again, this isn't new stuff, right? This is you can look at the Wheel of Life, or you can look at various other authors that have come, some of them hundreds of years ago, if not.
But you know what? I mean, it's really interesting when I look at the life map model, because actually almost perfectly aligns to the what happens next model. We've got the same sort of stuff but what's interesting is, and these always fascinates me, because we had a guest probably about a year and a bit ago on What Happens Next, who we talked about some of the subjects, but because he was a fitness trainer, his starting point was health. And I completely get that. And I think there's a really valid argument to that perspective, purely and simply because if we haven't got our health, what have we got?
Exactly.
But I think there's probably a lot more nuance to that, because often that if you've got lack of identity, I mean, there's a great book on this called Atomic Habits that talks about forming habits, and actually how we see ourselves can have an impact on the actions we take. Where do you start? I'd suggest it's with purpose and values. You'd potentially talk about identity. Ben, who's the guy, would talk about fitness. I think the point that I'd always make is just start.
Yeah, there isn't a right place to start.
No, you're right.
I mean, that's the reality. But the way that I do it is the way I did it, and the way I still do it, is breaking it up into 7 areas. One of them happens to be physical health.
Yeah.
And so it's physical health, mind and emotion, personal relationships, career and business, personal finance, social, family, and fun, which is kind of linked into one. And then there's something that's either spiritual, and that's really encompassing beliefs and values for me. So that can be all wrapped up into those 7. Your life can be divided by those 7 if you look at them.
Yeah.
And the physical health one, you're right. If you haven't got that, what have you got? All right. So it is important. And it's probably the easiest one that I use as well for explanation, because people can relate to it. So think of this like a giant spreadsheet. Okay. And the each of those 7 are the rows down the left hand side. So across the top you've got you can call them different things. Let's call them goals for ease of explanation. Okay, you'll have a goal. We divide it into a year's goal and then 3 and 5+ years away goals, and each of those goals will have some actions. What actions do you need to take in order to meet that goal? Okay, and they'll be different depending on the year that you're talking about. And then we'll come back to this: the why, the purpose. Why are you doing that? So, in the example, let's use physical health as an example. So, and I'll talk about me when I first started. So when I first started, I already said that my health wasn't good, you know, and so I thought, well, it's no good saying, yeah, how can I measure it, right? So I went down fundamental. My waist measurement was too big, right? I thought, okay, I need to knock off a couple of inches at least off the waist, right? Ideally more, to be honest, right? So, but what's realistic in a year? What's realistic in 3+ years? Because I realized it wasn't, you know, just going to crash diet. It was like a new regime that I had to adopt, and it had to be slow and steady. And then I looked at things like my cholesterol, my BMI. It's measurable numbers that you can put in.
But here's the interesting thing for me, and I've really been fascinated about your insight to that. You can do that with health really well, because there's all these data points that you can turn around and go, here's what success looks like. How do you do that with the spiritual component?
Yeah, some of it's subjective, but but it is doable. And again, it comes down to, you know, self-honesty and so on. But just to get back to the thing, so because it is the easiest to explain and it is the most measurable. So a good example that I had recently, there was a woman that we were talking with and helping, who wasn't quite a grandmother, but she was hoping to be really soon. Okay. And we were talking about this, and she said, okay, well, what's your why? Because there's a why for these, all of these actions. It's all very well writing things down on paper, right? But are you going to follow through and do it?
Yeah.
And so the why is so important. And we talked it through with her, and her why was, I need to get physically fit. I need to be more flexible. I'm going to be a grandmother, right? It's kind of pending, almost happening. And I want to be able to get down on the floor, play with grandkids, and most importantly, I want to be able to get up again, right? She was in her sort of early 70s, actually, that we were having this conversation with her. And that was the powerful why that got her off to the yoga class. Right? And it helped. So we for each of the 7 areas, we follow exactly the same process. And we have a why for each of the 7. You are right, though. When you get down to the some of the more softer elements, you know, spiritual beliefs and whatever, it's more subjective whether you've achieved that. But what I have for myself is I have my life map on my laptop, and I look at it every day. So that gives me accountability. Right? And I look at it, I go, well, hold on, Dave, you need to pull your finger out here, right?
Yeah, well, I had a really, because there's a spiritual element is one we talk quite a lot about on What Happens Next. But for somebody who doesn't, I'm not religious, I really struggled with how that spiritual element fit into my life. So yeah, interestingly, I had a really great interview with a guy called John Dunkley, and John explained how the Greeks had 3 principles when they were talking about well-being. So the one we all know is hedonism, how to have fun with people we love and like, and and do all the fun stuff. Then there's eudaimonism, what gives us meaning and purpose. The one that I didn't know about was the principle of charonic well-being, which talks about what gives us awe in the world. And I had a really interesting conversation with John, because I said to John, a lot of people get awe from walking into a church and feeling that communal experience. And then he said, it's interesting because I get awe from being at a dance concert and dancing with 50,000 people. And that to him was his spiritual connection. For me, it's been in nature or walking by the beach. And I think when I look at how to measure spiritual well-being, I think an interesting marker might be, how many opportunities have you given yourself to experience awe? What do you think of that?
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good measure.
Yeah.
Man.
So what do you use as a measure for your spiritual component?
Well, I don't. I mean, I have my own.
Yeah.
And my is linked. Okay, we're very similar actually in our thought process. My awe is nature.
Yeah.
Right. And I continue to be in awe of, through various experiences, that you have. But like you said, that is different for other people, right?
Yeah.
There is no one thing.
Right or wrong.
So it really is, it's digging down into people's, having conversation with them, and just going deeper and deeper until you something pops out, and it becomes theirs and their own their own measure.
Now, David, you talked earlier on about gratitude. How does gratitude play a part in your life, and how is that linked to your map?
Well, it's part, for me, it's part of the spiritual side. And again, I'm not religious, never have been. In fact, I'm a bit of a cynic, really, when it comes to religion. But everyone to their own. But so I see the spiritual side as more of a relationship with myself.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so, and a sense of connection.
Yeah.
Okay. So out of that is things that I do, if you like, that make me grateful, that make me think about how grateful I am, and the being in the present, being in the now, and obviously from what I've told you, my part of my awe was, and I think about it all the time actually, was admiring my late wife. Right.
Yeah.
And some of the things that she went through over that 10-year period were pretty horrific. And I'm in complete awe about what she did and how she went through it. And that for me is very, it's a very emotional trigger. But on the flip side of that, I'm very grateful, right, that I went through it with her. But I'm also grateful after the event that I'm still here.
Yeah.
And it really, kind of rams it home. I know I'm not different from, millions of other people that are out there that have, lost a loved one. But I'm grateful that I actually had, and I'm grateful every day.
Yeah.
As my dad used to say, when I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm doing well. I woke up."
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, it's that level of basic stuff. You know, you woke up, you think about it. Let's be grateful, and then I do practice. As a consequence, I practice some of the meditation.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it, but I do it. I do journaling like yourself, all right, and I practice particular mindfulness activities. That a little tip for this one, I've been doing it recently, and working up, is actually sitting in silence for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not meditation. It's just sitting in silence without thinking about anything.
Yeah.
To be fair, I'm only up to about 20 minutes, right? But
Well,
I'm working on it. It's not something you can do straight away, because thoughts come in and you have to let them.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with client yesterday, and we were talking about fitness. We were talking about health. We're both into keeping fit and active and stuff like that. And I'm guilty, David, of distracting myself too much. And Alan, who was a client who came in yesterday, said, no, I jump on the bike, or I go for a run, or I hit the gym, never wear headphones. And for him, that opportunity to reflect is really interesting. I remember having a conversation with a client a couple of years ago who'd been to a silent retreat, and it was like 3 days of just nothing. And you turn around and go, that I think I'd find really tough. And he said that for the first day, it was hell on earth. But then he got to a point where actually it started to really, really be helpful and useful. It's really interesting one. One of the things that I really love about your website, and I'd recommend if you're watching this, you check out David's work on the Live Mat website. We'll give that plug in the comments below, but we'll talk about it a bit later, is books. Because certainly reading far and wide has, out of everything that's had a decently positive impact in my life, has probably been one of the main ones. Tell me about your love of books.
Yeah. I've read so many, Chris, and there's probably a dozen that stick with me, and that I'll go back and read again. I'm not one of these people who can watch a film twice. All right, I just, you know, my wife now, Lisa, she can watch a film 20 times. Right? I can't do that. I've watched it.
You will read a book again.
But if it's a really good book, and to be fair, there's 2 or 3 films that I could watch again. But a good book, I can just pick up again. And once I've read it once, sometimes I just open it up in the middle.
Yeah.
And just kind of read and search for something that I perhaps missed last time. So yeah, there's some great books out there.
What are some of the 12 that really had a positive impact on your life?
Okay, so I reckon, it's so close. But if I had to rank them, and I keep on changing this in my own mind. But today, as I sit here, there's a book by Dean Graziosi, which I'm sure you know, called Millionaire Success Habits. Now, I particularly like that. It's not about the money. It's about everything else. It's and again, as we spoke about, it's not. It's actually based on lots of other thoughts and previous authors that came before it. But you know, Napoleon Hill, Tony Robbins, that sort of caliber. But the book makes you think about your life at any stage of life. Actually, it's something that people can read at any age, and and it covers the things that are important now. Lots of mindset things, which I find really interesting, and how you can change your mindset for the benefit of yourself and for others.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's about happiness, kindness, fulfillment. It's definitely not about wealth. He has a quote in there. I think it's his, which really hit home for me. No matter what anyone has told you in the past, you're entitled to and can possess fulfillment, joy, and abundance in all areas of your life.
I love that.
I thought that keeps on coming back to me. I keep on have to look it up and make sure I'm using the right words. But that was that's a book that I can just keep on going back to time and time again.
Yes.
Number 2, sound like a disc jockey coming in, is and this is another book that I keep on picking up. Tools of Titans.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss. Right?
Tim Ferriss. I love some of the things that are in there. If anybody hasn't read it, I'd definitely recommend that one. It's as you know, it's based on his podcast series.
Yeah.
Maybe an idea for you, Chris, for writing a book on that. So it's like, I don't think in Canada they call it Cole's Notes. It's like a summary of all the conversations and everything that he's learned and the tips.
And I love Tim Ferriss's podcast because he does really nuanced, interesting, deep dives into so many different subjects. It's incredible. It's brilliant. And what's number 3?
Well, just before we move on to 3, the thing that one of the things that made a huge impact on me, and it links back to the spiritual side actually, is some of the common things that he found with all the interviews that he did. And one of the common things was that more than 80% of the interviewees had some form of daily mindfulness.
Yeah, interesting.
And that was one of the things, to be honest, that got me into it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if it's good enough for those 80%, these are like superstar people in their fields. Yeah. What do they know that I don't, so that was one of the drivers for me. The third one, I'm not sure you would have read. And it's a book called Spaceman.
Okay.
By Mike Massimino.
Okay, tell me about
that. So Mike Massimino is an astronaut. He wrote the book about his background, his training. It's just an incredible journey that he went on. He actually ended up, he was, he came from a blue collar background. Okay. Not the sort of typical, fighter jet pilot idea, right? I always wanted to be, I think it was, he was watching the moon landing, right? He either wanted to be an astronaut or Superman or something, or whatever. Decided, was it Spider-Man? Decided that astronaut was probably a better choice, and made it from that point on. He was going to be an astronaut, and it was well, you don't have to be interested in space to enjoy this. It was kind of inspirational, really, about everything he went through. He wasn't the brightest. He was clever, but he wasn't the brightest. And he kept on going on and on and on, and overcame humongous obstacles, even to the point where he got into his late into his astronaut training, and they have to have medicals that they go through. And he was going to be going up on the Hubble, engineering the Hubble telescope. And they said, "Oh, really sorry, you're out. You flunked it. You're out of the medical because you've got the wrong shaped eyeballs."
You're joking.
He was like eclipsable.
Yeah.
And so they said, you wouldn't work when we're in space and whatever. And he begged them and said, "Look, I'll fix it.
And they said, you can't fix it. And he begged them, and they said, okay, we'll give you a year. And he went off and he changed the shape of his eyeballs.
How?
Alternative therapy, things that are not normal science issues. He went off and went alternative, and he literally done these exercises that changed the shape. So that for me was very inspirational and a lesson to never give up. You know, if your vision's out there, what you want,
carry on moving incrementally forward. Right? It's interesting. One of my favorite books is a book by an astronaut, a Canadian guy called Chris Hadfield.
Yeah,
and it goes back to that. There's a passage in that where he talks about being in space and realizing how insignificant we are as humans, but also how that gives us a certain freedom to live the lives however we want to live them. Really, really, really good. And I'll put the link to all three of them, and particularly the spaceman one, which I'm going to now pick up in the notes below.
Yeah.
I suppose the interesting thing is, and we find it a lot with our clients, there's a real desire in midlife or later midlife to think about the next stage of our lives and re-navigating. But as you said earlier, for years, until you had that situation with your wife, you didn't find the time to think about that re-navigation. If somebody is living a busy life, they're successful financially, but it means that all of their time's often taken up. What can we do to make sure that we are finding the time, headspace, and energy to work out what happens next?
Yeah, I have had lots of conversations about this with individuals, and I come to the point where, for me, it's not a sales pitch, right? I think there are certain people, maybe I was one of them, to be honest, that until something happens, right, they're almost are putting their head in the sand, and because they don't want to think about it, Chris.
I think often, as you say, you need to be ready for it, right?
You need to be ready, and lots of people are. Lots of people have realised actually that they need to be ready. It kind of dawns on them. They go, "Oh, yeah, I've got 10 years left. You know, I'm not sure what I'm going to do," and then they start. The fear kicks in.
Yeah.
Right, because as you know, the older you get, the faster time seems to move. Okay, 10 years is nothing. You know, it's back to my 20 good summers, right?
Yes.
All of a sudden you're halfway through your good summers, right? And potentially, right? Yes. And it's those people that I have the best conversations with. They go, okay, I don't know what to do. I realized I've got 10 years to go. I need to come up with a plan. And I accept that when we talk about the life plan and the life map, it's not necessarily something that's cast in stone. I think you've actually said this yourself. You know, there are things that will change, that will come out of left field, right? And you've got no control over that.
Yeah.
But you can just plan. You can come up with an idea of what you do, and 9 times out of 10, that's still valid. You know, any plan's a good plan. You know,
well, we talk about it from the financial planning perspective quite a lot, but it applies to life, right? There's a great quote. There's loads of good planning quotes, but my favourite is by the esteemed philosopher, Mr. Mike Tyson, who said, "Planning is great until you get punched in the face," right?
Yeah.
Now, why is that important? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan, and actually, there's like, you know, planning like the other one, and I can't remember who said it right. Is planning is important, but the plan is irrelevant because actually in the heat of battle it just doesn't happen. The idea is that you plan to take the next incremental action and then you replan, because you just all the plan is a way to work out just the next step moving forward, right? And for me, that element of the book that I talk about most, in particular on what happens next, is one called "Design Your Life" by Bill Burnett, and his TED talk is brilliant on this. And he's got a philosophy about incremental experimentation to work out what you want to do. And I'd suggest that for a lot of the people we talk to and a lot of our clients about what happens next, just trying stuff to see what you might want to fit into your plan over the longer term might be a way to do it. But plans cast in stone very rarely work.
They don't work. I can talk about my own one because that's close to me. I created it. Well, no, say 14 years ago now, 15 years ago. It might be longer, actually, now thinking about it. It's actually has changed very little. I do adjust it every now and again because things happen, but it hasn't really changed that much. But the important thing, Chris, is to recognize that something has changed and then do something about it. Take an action.
What I'm curious about is what has changed in the plan and what stayed the same.
For me, hardly anything has changed from goals and actions. Some of my actions have changed as new family members have arrived. That's definitely changed, and some of that has changed my time frames, things that I wanted to do. But a lot of it is very similar. I mean, again, if you've got, just say you've got 10 years to go, right, before you're thinking of retiring, whatever retirement means, which is another subject, but you've got 10 years to go. If you're a couple, it's a conversation that you need to have, right?
About
how that's going to work, right? And you might be retiring at different stages. How's that going to work? And you are going to be around. Touch wood, you could be around for another 30 years, right? That's a huge portion, a huge percentage of your overall life, and it deserves, in my view, some thought. Some planning, and when we, and you have to look internally and go, okay, well, how are my relationships? How's my relationship with my significant other, if you have one? How are my relationships with my kids, with my friends? And you go, okay, well, that's not perfect. That needs some work, right? Maybe then you've got some time to do something about it.
But you've got to make the effort as well.
You have to take action.
Yeah.
And again,
I was fortunate enough to get to go to the Amazon rainforest last year with my brother. And when I was over there, I read a book called The Good Life by a guy called Robert Waldinger. Robert Waldinger is one of the doctors. Interestingly, talks very eloquently about the power of now and what the Buddhists believe about that particular subject. But he's the professor behind the Harvard happiness study, the 80-year study of literally they went back and interviewed people for 80 years about what success in life meant and happiness. And he said that the overall well-being of the people in that particular study was defined by one thing, and that's the quality of their relationships. And I found that fascinating. Definitely worth reading that book. Certainly amazing. And I'd suggest that it's probably more nuanced than that, but the fact that those people all throughout that period of time, not how much money you had or what you did, but actually how much you invested in the time, effort, and energy with people you love and like is fascinating. David, we could carry on forever with this conversation. I think we only got through half of the questions I was going to ask you. But unfortunately, we need to come to an end now.
Okay.
Where can people find out about the Live Map, connect with you, understand more about the work you do?
Well, you mentioned the Life Map website. I'd actually prefer if they went to look. We run our coaching now on a school platform.
Yeah.
And that would be my preferred link.
Yeah, we can put that in the notes.
Which we can put there, but that's so it's school.com/the life map. But we can put that. I'll give you the information for there.
Yeah. And are you on LinkedIn? Are you on any sort of?
Oh yeah, we're on LinkedIn, and perhaps I'll forward on. Perhaps we can put that at the bottom of the of anything that goes out. But yeah, LinkedIn personally, and the life maps on there as well.
Amazing, brilliant. We'll do all that. Thank you for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's one that we could have done for 2 hours, I reckon, to cover everything we needed to. But I hope if you're watching this, it's given you a real insight into thinking about some of the aspects that you need to consider when you're thinking about what happens next. Have a lovely day, and we'll